Good afternoon and good wishes, my friends and listeners who've joined me for the last several months on Circles Edges Radio. Today I'm going to introduce something a little different from our regular evenings together. I'm calling this mini-series of episodes Circles Edges, The Waking Hours. These are daytime conversations shared from another podcast, Create Magic at Work with Amy Lynn Durham, where I recently had the chance to speak a bit more openly about the show, my own life, some of my philosophies, experiences, as well as questions that are raised for me by you in our dialogue together across the last several months. So you can think of these episodes as companion pieces, not quite the candlelit room of our usual time together, but another doorway into the same circle. I'm so glad to be able to share these conversations with you, and I am grateful, as always, that you're here. When we have these sort of leaky identities that, are permeable to the world around us, that they're not necessarily all owned internally, but there's something about our identity that is dependent outside of us. That's kind of where there's this perfect storm. So if my identity is somebody who is a fixer and shows up in the world and takes care of everything and makes everything better, and the world responds positively to that, because why wouldn't they? People want to be helped and they want to be seen and noticed. If our identity isn't entirely autonomous within us, we run the risk then of unknowingly needing that relationship with other people to feel that we are who we are.
Hey, it's Amy. Welcome to Create Magic at Work, where we cast visions for a future of work where business decisions ripple outward to our teams, our communities, the planet, and humanity as a whole. If you're ready to edge walk instead of sleepwalk through your leadership, you're in the right place. So let's start making magic at work. Hi, everyone. Amy here. I want to invite you into a space today that is a little bit deeper than our usual conversations. If you've ever felt completely drained by the emotions of the people around you, or if you feel a constant heavy need to fix things for others just so you can feel okay again, you're not alone. One of our most popular guests on the podcast, Dr. Aaron Tabacco, is back with us, and we discuss the shadow side of empathy, the inspiration behind his new podcast, Circles Edges, and his concept surrounding time, quantum presence. We realized this conversation was so deep that we're bringing it to you in a two-part series. So in this first half, we're exploring why one of your greatest gifts, your empathy, might actually be causing you distress. And actually, Aaron calls it empathic distress. We're going to look at Aaron's new podcast, Circles Edges, and also how to identify if you're operating with leaky boundaries that are exhausting your spirit. Sit with us in this conversation and exercise the Edgewalker skill of focus, staying truly centered and giving your full attention to a concept that has significance and importance. Because this one's deep and is an invitation to look at how we all show up in the world. Let's step into part one. Hey everyone, welcome back to Create Magic at Work. Today is a super special day for me and hopefully for all of you, because we have one of our most popular guests returning to have another conversation that hopefully resonates and inspires with everyone. And it is Dr. Aaron Tabacco. I have asked Aaron back to the show because it's been a while. It's been a minute since we've had you on the show.
It has been a while. Yeah.
Gosh, I should have looked up how long it's been, but a couple of years ago, you shared how to be present at a whole other level, sort of, in my opinion, blew the lid off of what our current sort of ideas were around presence, which I so appreciated. And we'll put all the links to
Mm.
these past episodes in the show notes, but that took off. That was one of the most popular episodes in Create Magic at Work history, along with
Wow.
your conversation around feedback, which you came back and talked about feedback, which in my opinion is a feedback model that you shared that is on a whole other level than the ones that are taught in the corporate space and in trainings.
Hmm.
Incredible, eye-opening work. So thank you for sharing that. And I have asked Aaron back to Create Magic at Work because he has some newer ideas and concepts that you and I have talked about for quite some time, but we haven't really recorded and shared it with the Create Magic at Work listeners or community. So thanks for coming back
Mm.
to dive into, I think, 3 I'm going to try to cover in this episode. 3 really cool, eye-opening, enlightening topics. So thanks for being here, Aaron.
Oh, as always, thank you for having me. Yeah, I think it was it may have been 3 years ago when we had that conversation on, presence at a very high level. And our relationship has grown quite a bit over those years. We knew each other before that, but not a whole lot of time. Maybe 4 years. I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. But yeah, I'm grateful to be back. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm glad that some of the things that I'm sharing out in the world are resonating with you and others. And if we can talk about that and it's useful to people, then I feel like that's a really good day.
Yeah. And I should share with everyone listening, since the start of Magic Thread Media, the podcast network that I started, Aaron has started his own podcast, which will be a topic of conversation today as well, called Circles Edges. And it is it's a late night radio show style podcast designed to be listened to before we go to bed at night, really. The show releases in the evening. And it's
Hmm.
been such an honor to be a part of bringing that to life because the response from Circle's Edges has been incredible.
Yeah, it really
Incredible.
has. And to make sure it's clear to everyone listening, Circle's Edges wouldn't be here without you, Amy. And you're, reaching out to say, I am launching Magic Thread Media, giving me goosebumps. I'm like, perfect name for you and a media company.
Yeah.
And I want you to do a show. And whatever you want to do, Aaron. And I was like, okay, something inside me says, yes, I need to do this. And so I appreciate you opening that doorway. I think it's come to me at a very important time in my life and it has really become a focus of my spiritual work in the world right now. So thank you for the opportunity.
So while we're on the topic, tell us more about Circle's Edges because, you know, you your voice and your message resonates with people so deeply and they feel so connected to you when you speak and you have a way about speaking and listening to others where they really feel seen. And so
Mm.
being a guest on podcasts was great, but I definitely saw that you needed your own container for this energy. And I'm honored to have to have that container for Circle's Edges. Just tell us a little bit more about Circle's Edges and what people can expect to hear if they head on over to listen to the show.
Well, I mean, for me, this was born out of a really deep need to, one, find an energetic current of connection and comfort in the world right now. I just over the last year, I have become increasingly chaotic in my energy, responding to all of the things happening in the world, and feeling sort of agitated and restless and anxious and concerned about that. I'm concerned about myself, concerned about, my family, our society, the world at large. And when you reached out about a show, I knew a few things right away. I didn't want to interview people. Um, I didn't want there to be any dialogue that was not between me and a listener. I wanted to create a space where people could come for really substantive, deep, connecting, and real talk with somebody that felt safe. And for me, I reflected on my own childhood and was taken back to, growing up in the 80s in particular. This late night FM radio voice phenomenon kind of became a modality of media in those years. And I would be awake at night, like many of us are, restless and unable to sleep. And often I would just literally turn the dial on my FM AM radio to find somebody out there that I felt I could connect to, and that this model. I mean, maybe they would DJ some music or what have you here or there, but very often it was just long monologues. Sometimes they would take a caller, sometimes they wouldn't. They would muse about all kinds of things going on in the world and everyday life, and they were just keeping people company. And there was something really deeply comforting about that, about both the intimacy and the distance with the stranger. And I felt when considering a show, I thought that's really the energy that I feel I need in the world right now. And maybe it's time for me to show up and be that energy and not just look for it as a recipient, but generate it. And so, that's what it is, right? It is some very deep, reflective, philosophical, spiritually intelligent conversations that are thematically tied to the repeating patterns and experiences of our lives. So the circles that come in many, many forms. There are external circles of society and relationships. There are internal circles. There are very large arcs like, whole civilizations and societies and philosophies and things that come and go like tides. But every once in a while, we as people, we notice these circles, these patterns. And very often, that noticing is a signal that there's some edge it's exposing for us that we need to pay attention to. And that edge is usually an invitation to move into a higher self in some way, to improve how we're showing up in the world, to experience a different relationship with the world around us or ourselves. And those edges, we could choose to draw back and ignore them, or we can kind of lean into them. And my own experience has been that when I discover these patterns, especially if they're patterns that are unpleasant patterns in some way that cause distress or grief or loss or anxiety, I have learned the practice of waking up to it quickly, diving in to understand it, and then rather than running from it, like turning full head on into it, to discover the edge and the invitation and to grow. Because I don't want to be living out that pattern over and over and over again, especially if it's, very unpleasant or keeping me back in some way. So, I mean, that's kind of, like the 30,000-foot view of what Circles Edges is. It's deep personal connection across space and time with people, talking about things that matter and that, might help people navigate some of the edges they're seeing in themselves.
Would you say that part of Circles Edges is this pattern and maybe bringing the pattern to our attention? And then when we face that edge, Is that what you're saying? Is that a moment that we break the circle? Is that a moment we break the pattern if it's something that is causing grief or is harming us?
I mean, it certainly could be. I think the position I take with the show, and listeners who've tuned in will understand that it's not an advice show. I don't know what is right for anybody listening. We haven't had any conversations or dialogue directly. These are really just opportunities to maybe reflect as an individual, examine what's there. And if there's something inside that really, one of these sort of circles that really touches you or grabs your attention, the invitation then is to go on a path of discovery to figure out what that means for you, and to know that you can just keep tuning into the show and I'll be there, and you're not having to do it alone necessarily. Maybe distant. I might not ever know the story, but there's a certain comfort in knowing that you're not the only one out in the world who might be trying to move beyond something, break a cycle, grow from it, or not even necessarily. Sometimes the circles we experience, we can't extricate from our lives, but maybe we can live in relationship with them differently. So there's lots and lots of options. I never pretend to know what is the right answer for anybody, but all I do is sort of try to call attention to the things I have noticed, and then invite people to do the same.
Yeah. One of the things that I felt really resonated with me was the episode on fixation
Mm,
and
mm-hmm,
talking about the circle. In that circle, I don't know if it was the circle or the edge, the need that we have to fix,
mm-hmm,
the need that comes up within us to step in and help others when in fact it might be detrimental to ourselves and the other person.
mm-hmm,
Two words that you used really hit me was empathic distress. And I
mm-hmm,
have felt that. I have felt empathic distress in situations where I can feel what's going on
mm-hmm.
and I want to step in and fix it, whatever it might
Okay.
be. And one of the realizations from your show and from fixation was really that was kind of about me and
Right.
me being uncomfortable in the distress that I was feeling and working towards making that distress go away. And the damage that
Yes.
it can cause was a new revelation in listening to that episode of fixation and hearing about empathic distress. I hadn't heard that before, and I listened to a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm,
We also hosted an Edgewalker Cafe on the shadows of empathy, sort of connecting the two here,
mm-hmm,
and lots of themes coming up with that. Why are we doing this? And how do
mm-hmm.
we walk that edge of not abandoning someone that needs help if we are compassionate and have empathy versus stepping in to fix everything all the time to alleviate our own distress that we're sitting with.
Yeah. Well, I think many people responded to that. I had quite a bit of feedback on that episode, in terms of uh, sort of high empathy people reaching out and really talking about, how these things really touched them and called them to attention as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, you certainly weren't alone in that. I think, it's a little bit of it's a bit of a messy circle that we find ourselves in, many of us. And there's no reason to judge ourselves for it. Let me just start with that. This isn't something that we should moralize within ourselves and feel bad about. Neurobiologically, humans have been a successful species. Evolutionary biologists talk about this because we developed this internal biological, neurological capacity for empathy. Right? Like it's helped us be successful as a species because we become stronger and care for one another better when we have this emotional response to other people and their needs. So it's a fundamentally human thing. Unfortunately, many of us grow up in situations, and this is a global phenomenon, where that capacity for empathy and its expression and communication is not well stewarded by our families and the rest of the world. And a portion of us incorrectly tie our identities as showing up, through the behavior of showing up empathetically for somebody. We tie our identities to that and start to see ourselves as somebody who is responsible to respond to everybody and their needs, and look for opportunities then to kind of live that story out over and over and over again. And when we have these sort of leaky identities that, are permeable to the world around us, that they're not necessarily all owned internally, but there's something about our identity that is dependent outside of us. That's kind of where there's this perfect storm. So if my identity is somebody who is a fixer and shows up in the world and takes care of everything and makes everything better, and the world responds positively to that, because why wouldn't they? People want to be helped and they want to be seen and noticed. If our identity isn't entirely autonomous within us, we run the risk then of unknowingly needing that relationship with other people to feel that we are who we are. Like it's like the mirror. Well, it's like looking in a mirror behaviorally. I show up to fix something, somebody responds to that, and then I see myself as that person, and it's this like self-affirming cycle or circle. The problem is that as altruistic and as loving and as compassionate as showing up for people can be, we can at times be utilizing that energy of whatever they're going through to benefit our own identity affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes about us, even though it should never be about us. And that's kind of what I mean about like this idea of like leaky identity or permeable identity. And, on one extreme that you can see that manifested in people who experience codependency in relationships, where two folks who have kind of some focused dysfunctions ally themselves to actually experience that circle intentionally over and over and over and over again, which psychologically manifestations of that are usually pretty pathological and pretty damaging to people. That's a very different function than interdependence, where there's two autonomous identities choosing to work together cooperatively. This is a very different situation. So, and then in the episode, I kind of talked about the many ways that can unintentionally get in the way of progress for ourselves and for others. So for example, if someone shows up and they're very, very distressed about something, and they start to tell the story and break down into tears, if we're one of those folks who's really struggling with the fixing and the leaky identity piece, and we jump right in right away, with shh, it's okay, I've got you, everything's going to be okay. I'm here. I'm going to take care of you. We'll get through this. This immediately responding to a situation to affirm our identities, do our jobs, do the things that, make us feel like we're whole. And notice I said, make us feel like we're whole. We shut down like the expression of someone's grief. We literally say, stop. Like, don't express this. And that gets in the way of showing up for someone as a witness. It also gets in the way of them expressing needs, thoughts. How many of us actually need to talk things out aloud to even understand what it is we're thinking? And when we jump in right away because we're in a state of this empathic distress, we clip all of that opportunity off for expression, for thinking, for reflection. And we center our own need, as you said, Amy. Like you noticed that at times in these experiences, that it's your own discomfort calling you for some sort of form of self-soothing. And actually, it's interesting because it's self-soothing, but it's in the context of another person.
Yeah.
And that's what we don't want to show up for people in the world that way. I don't think we want to. And I think most of us don't realize if we're in that cycle that we're even doing that. But this is very much a pattern, and I can speak to it pretty, from a pretty educated perspective because I spent years, as a nursing professor teaching, frontline nursing caregivers, professional nurses, how to do that, how to show up and be present for other people. Now I do it in the world of executive coaching. And when people are struggling to feel like they're adding value or helping somebody find comfort or helping somebody achieve some sort of epiphany or great insight, if that feels like it's lacking in the exchange, then that individual experiences a lot of times distress. I've literally had people crying, saying, but all I want to do is be helpful. And in that session, I didn't do anything that was helpful. And I feel like I failed them. And there's this like debrief after a session. And it's very interesting. It's just an interesting phenomenon to sit with. And it's like, well, that might be, that's all your interpretation and your experience of what happened.
Yeah.
And also, that's not the focus. Like this, you're literally, if you kind of were to watch yourself on a camera, you would be like, wow, I didn't even talk about the person and their needs or anything. I'm debriefing all about my lived experience in that moment. It's like, oh yeah, see, these are the things that when that sort of circle emerges, and but sometimes people just get tired of that. There's a lot of people who kind of self-identify as empaths in a very science fiction-y sort of way, as if that is kind of a real thing. And it is a very real thing that we have the biology to have our emotional centers activated by someone else's lived experience. That is the nature of this mechanism. It's also not true that we are experiencing the other person's emotions, thought, spirit, etc. I mean, that is what's happening in their body, in their spirit, in their emotional state, in their world. And we begin telling ourselves a story that we understand, we know, we relate to it. But really, it's our body responding to this observation and filling in lots and lots of gaps. So until we realize that and start to take a walk down the edge of that empathy to understand when it's serving us and when it's serving others, it's only after taking that journey that we can, I think, kind of rise above all of that and accept that we have these emotional responses and bring them forward in authenticity and yet not make it all about us.
Yeah. Just my take on everything that you're saying. This rise of spirituality that I've seen in pop culture, there's been a lot of language around the empath that has that more people are exposed to and speaking about. And okay, I'm just going to say everything that I really want to say. Like,
Please
let me
do.
just, like I always do. So I started seeing it when these things sort of became more popular in pop culture. This pop culture spirituality is, I guess, what I call it. And there was something of a shadow of this in it where people were made to feel special, that they had some sort of special gift or specialness or special quality, like being an empath. And then I saw a lot of individuals that started identifying as being an empath, using using that identity, or using maybe a spiritual counselor or advisor or an astrologer or whoever told them, "Oh my gosh, you're such an empath. Oh yeah,
Right.
you can take on the energy of the room and you can feel all the feelings." And so there was an element of specialness in that. And then there was also an element of, I'm special. I can't be in this room anymore because I take on everybody's energy, or I have to shield myself from you energetically because I'm an empath. And the empath mantra that I've learned and I've shared with others is observe, don't absorb. When I started studying the SQ21, the 21 skills of spiritual intelligence, there was a teaching that shared, as coaches, as therapists, as a person that wants to be of service or help someone else, that there is a big difference between empathy and compassion. And in their teachings, empathy is when you are taking on others' stuff as your own. And as you said, there's leakage there. Like, it's almost like you can't differentiate between what's yours and what's not yours. And so essentially you're taking on the suffering of someone else and trying to fix it yourself, but it's not your suffering. It's not yours to fix. And so in the SQ teachings, they recommend leading from more of, this is their language and their definitions, but like from a compassionate state where I am sort of what you said, I'm autonomous, but I can see the suffering of others and I can help alleviate that suffering without taking it on myself.
Right.
And I think there's something interesting about the evolution of what's going on with spirituality that I'm watching. There was something of a shadow there where people were made to feel special. And now that things are shifting and evolving, I think there's a realization that, I don't know, maybe the SQ teachings are really onto something, that leading from compassion might be the way to lead with all of this. Because as you talked about, then there's this other part of empathy where it's a huge shadow, where I'm not even focused on the person. You just gave an example. I'm focused on how that went for me and what did that look like for me. But then there's another edge to that where I think there's a whole other teaching that women have to, or lesson, or energy that we have to kind of perk up and pay attention to, because there's a lot of system socialization in women to be the fixers, to be the healers, to be the nurturers, to maybe not have strong boundaries because of all of that wrapped up into one. So I've said a lot. We're getting like so deep today. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because I definitely feel like there's an evolution of spirituality going on. There's a recognition, just to kind of recap everything, all of my riffing here, there's an evolution of, I don't know if this spirituality teaching is resonating with me as a woman surrounding being autonomous. There's other layers there. Also, the recognition of the high self-orientation when I am in empathic distress at times. So those are sort of the themes that are coming to me as you share. And then I feel frustrated inside too, because I'm like, well, I'm a human. And if somebody is hurting and if I want to help them, now what do I do with this? How do I differentiate all of these things you and I just talked about instead of just living my life and wanting to be a good person and helping? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of people listening are
Yeah,
sort
it
of
is
feeling these same
complicated.
things. So that's why I bring it up.
Right. Yeah. Well, as I kind of said in the episode, what I don't want to message is that every, desire to be a compassionate responder in the world is coming from a sense of selfishness. I don't believe that it is by any means, but it is a complicated relationship we have when we are experiencing, emotional empathy. Emotions are arising within us physically, relating to another person's experience, and then the expression of compassion toward them, which I think is like the active outcome that can stem from that empathic or empathetic response. And I think maybe that's the nuance: is there's empathetic and there's empathic. And I think that between the world of science fiction and pop culture spirituality, the concept of being an empath has been kind of written into a certain script about what it is, and some things being factual, like the fact that we can experience empathy, that there's a part of our brains that is activated by someone else's emotions, and similar emotions in ourselves can rise forward, sometimes different emotions, but it's just this emotional conversation we're having. It can happen without words, even, looks, glances, tearful eyes. I mean, you don't necessarily need words to communicate, through this concept of empathy, or this function of empathy. But to the points you're making about how society and society, meaning all, I'm using it to mean all of the social influences in our lives, our families of origin, the friends we choose and grow up with, the adults we associate with, our intimate partners, the communities we align ourselves with, the faith groups or the vocational communities, the pursuits, all of that, is that we end up in trouble, like I said earlier, when we've somehow attached our identity and our sense of who we are to the experience of this empathy and compassion in its expression. That's where I think pop culture, maybe those in the spiritual
That's a good one.
industry.
The
I'm going
industry.
to say
Yeah.
that. The
Yeah.
spiritual
There you go.
industrial complex that is out there, selling all kinds of things to people. One of the things that's true about people, generally speaking, this is from, the body of work in psychology, people who tend to be very, very high in in measures of empathy, very often come from traumatic backgrounds in some way. Something about their development, life experiences has taken that early human developmental ability to experience emotion in ourselves by witnessing it in others, and has really turned that switch on and the volume all the way up. And so unknowingly, it's not like people said, oh, I'm going to become dysfunctionally empathetic in the world. Nobody says that. But that's kind of what happens, is that volume gets so turned up, and then people become hypersensitive to that experience. If you're looking at a population of people who have had that experience, and then someone comes along selling a workshop that's going to tell you how to deal with the world as an empath, because you're special. I mean, gosh, if I've spent a lifetime experiencing tragedy and someone shows up and says, you're so special because of this, there's a certain vulnerability and a willingness to want to go down a path to say, oh, right, maybe this is something that sets me apart. something that stabilizes my identity, right? That's,
Mm-hmm.
I think, what I'm getting to is that this is a stabilizing factor, and it's an affirming factor of that leaky identity problem we're having, linking our doing, the act of doing, which is fixing, to our being, and our identity. So there's just a lot of, I think it's kind of a perfect storm of situations, whether it's social scripting about women and nurturing, for example, or, children who have had adverse childhood events that really follow them for many years, and kind of set them up to be the responsible, caregiving, nurturing types to keep everything moving in the world, which was adaptive. Like they had to do that to survive. I come from that background, so I'm not
Mm-hmm.
pointing any fingers. I can specifically say that this has been a part of my journey. It can be very, very, very overwhelming to have to sort all of that out. And so when people show up with answers, it feels good. And if one of the answers is, you're this unique human that very few people have this, ability, and there's something special about you, and here's how you're going to have to navigate that. Well, there is something special about you. I mean, the ability to have a really highly tuned sense of, emotion, or hopefully emotional vocabulary to go with it, not just the feelings, but, some emotional intelligence around what all those feelings are. That is special, and it's wonderful. It isn't you. That's not
Mm-hmm.
your identity. It is something that occurs within you. And then the calling is to figure out, how do you navigate the world in a way that actually is productive and generative and compassionate for self and others, and not be somebody who maybe is distracted from doing the hard work to plug those leaky
Yeah.
identity boundaries.
Yeah. And I think the gifts, if I may, of an empath are available to everyone because we're human. And so
Mm-hmm.
maybe that ability to be attuned to the emotions in your environment came from the different places that you mentioned they might come from.
Mm-hmm.
We all have that ability within us. And then whether we have to plug the leaks and figure out how to use it in a healthy way, or don't have that ability at all, or maybe we need to skill build in that ability a little bit more, right? I think I'm looking at it
Mm-hmm.
is as a way of, we can all tap into this and then figure out a way to use it for good, for the greater good of all.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's, I think, the whole purpose, and what we're getting to, I think, really naturally, is why the program is called Circles Edges. Right? It's like, because we're in this pattern of showing up in the world in a very specific way. I mean, the reality is, if for anyone who is listening today and thinking about this from the perspective of, gosh, I identify as an empath. What does this mean for me? Is this bringing up something that feels threatening to you? Is it something that feels affirming to you? Is it something that's enlightening to you? I don't know what your experience of it is, but I guess what I would offer is, if you feel that much of your life experience is in the empath or empathic realm, what have you noticed about relationships with the world around you? Because if you look back and much of your experience brings sadness, loss, confrontation, confusion, difficulty, distance, drama, that may be calling you to look at the edge within that circle to see if there is a different way that you can still honor the fact that you have an expanded, volume all the way up ability to witness and respond to emotions in the world around you, and separate your identity from that so that you can learn to be with others in the world in a way that feels healthier and more generative and more compassionate and less exhausting. Because what I hear from people who say, oh, I'm an empath, and it's just exhausting. It's usually the second phrase is something about exhaustion. I just get so exhausted by certain people, and I get so exhausted being in relationships, and I get so exhausted by all of these other pieces. That's an edge calling your attention, because there isn't actually a necessity for you to be exhausted by all of that. It is something that can be lived with as the beautiful gift it is, without it depleting you of your life force and your autonomy to go forward in the world and your opportunity to be in relationship with others.
Thank you for that insight.
You're welcome.
And that's where we're going to pause for today. You have a week to sit with these ideas before we go where we're headed next. I'm genuinely curious to hear what came up for you as you sat with us in this first half. I know a lot of things came up for me, especially surrounding the empathic distress piece. Next week in part 2, we pick up where we left off and move into quantum presence. We're going to discuss Erin's concept that time is not linear, how to operate from your higher self, and the evolution of spirituality and how to move toward a state of interdependent, compassionate presence. Make sure you're subscribed so you can step right back into the conversation with us the second part 2 drops, and we'll see you then.
Thank you for joining me for some of these daylight crossings, and I look forward to returning to you again next week in the evening for another episode of our traditional Circles Edges Radio Hour. Until then, I'm sending you good wishes and a good day.
Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to a Magic Thread Media podcast.